coasts and northern coasts of Scotland too. But with those winds and plenty of cloud and outbreaks of rain, that's going to hold temperatures up around the high single figures. Heading into tomorrow, it's another unsettled day ahead with outbreaks of rain starting to creep in from the west, turning clearer across Scotland, though plenty of blustery showers moving through here. These could turn wintry across high ground. And then once again, we'll see another change from the southwest as further strong winds and heavy outbreaks of rain start to move in here. So gradually turning more and more unsettled, the best of the brightness across the far east. That's it from me. Bye-bye for now.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M8 in Glasgow, the outside lanes closed eastbound at junction 25 at Cardonald after an accident. There are queues from junction 29 at St James. The A1 in Northumberland is blocked southbound by an accident between Annex South and Swalland, causing queues. County Durham, the A19 is closed northbound off the A67 at Craythorne after an accident. On the M606 in West Yorkshire, there's a lane closed southbound after an accident between junctions 2 and 1 towards the M62. Queues towards there. And on the M62 in West Yorkshire, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed eastbound just before junction 28 at Tingley after an accident, with queues from junction 26 at Chain Bar. The port of Holyhead remains closed. The M2 in Kent is partly blocked westbound by an accident at junction 5 at Sittingbourne, and in Cornwall the A30 is closed eastbound at Camborne after an accident last night.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
As Strictly Come Dancing approaches its iconic Blackpool episode, marking halfway through the competition, visually impaired dancers across the country have spoken out about how groundbreaking the casting of Chris McCausland is, who suffers from, if I hope I'm saying this correctly, retinitis pigmentosa, and they have found him particularly inspiring. We've been talking, Sean, about how the casting of Strictly has been inspiring to so many people, but I imagine there'll be lots of people who are watching this at home finding your story of resilience really inspiring, because you've obviously really been through it. Is dancing something that has sort of, you know, helped keep you going through all of those troubles? And what does it mean to you to see casting like this on a show like Strictly Come Dancing?
Like I say, all the things I went through. So those 9 years when I wasn't dancing, you know, I was still dancing in my head and just banging on to other people. Very much not just people with sight loss. You know, I've been a big advocate for people with social isolation. So many people on their own now, social anxiety, especially since COVID. And I just want people to get out. The stuff that I'm doing and all the stuff Chris is obviously doing, it will inspire others. Again, like I say, just not people just with sight loss. I had so many people come up to me in the early days, guys, and now that say, you know what, Shawnee, I've seen you do it, so I'm just going to do it. But you just got to get over yourself, because if you bother to do the maths, you know, because all it is maths and walking. Yeah. You know, that's all it is.
Maths and walking actually sounds quite difficult.
Sean, thank you.
Oh, come on, mate. Can you shout? Can you walk? Crack on.
Sean, you're an inspiration. Thank you, mate, for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. You're a star, and so glad.
Just before I go, I'm just going to say, this is Kev. Here's Kev.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Morning, 9:30 on Tuesday, the 17th of December. Live across the UK, this is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cakes, who's in for Bev Turner.
Well, is the Church of England in crisis? The Archbishop of York is refusing calls to resign as he's criticised over his handling of a sex abuse case. More on that to come.
And minutes are under new pressure to take concerns about China more seriously as the government is warning the alleged spy Yang Tengbo, great mates of Prince Andrew, is not a lone wolf.
And has Prince Andrew been exiled? The Duke of York will miss Sandringham Christmas celebrations with the royal family following embarrassment over his links to the Chinese spy scandal.
The father and stepmother of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif will be sentenced today for her brutal murder. As the government steps up protection for the most vulnerable children, will parents lose the automatic right to home education?
And national insurance rises in Chancellor Rachel Reeves' budget is putting charities at risk, as children's hospices reveal they'll be taking a £5 million annual hit.
As funding is cut and taxes are hiked, our hospices are at risk. We're at Francis House in Greater Manchester finding out what support they want from the government.
And Sir Keir Starmer will visit troops serving on Estonia's border with Russia today, and the latest part of his round-the-world trip. Catherine Forster has the latest.
Yes, I'm here in Tallinn in Estonia, where the Prime Minister is on the last day of his last foreign trip this year. I'll tell you what he's up to shortly.
And a convicted terrorist is suing a pub called the Saracen's Head Inn, saying he was deeply offended by its sign. But now the landlord fights back. We'll have the latest.
The irony over the Duke of York, the Duke of York, Freudian slip, the Archbishop of York.
Oh yes, York's in trouble today.
York's
That's
in
a good
trouble.
point.
If he's forced to stand, and he's second in the hierarchy of the Church of England, he was just about to take over from Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who's quitting because of his failure to act over child abuse, and now that's exactly what the Archbishop of York's been accused of.
It does seem like a crisis, and this story is really shocking. This priest was allowed to continue working for many, many years, even after being convicted. I think there's some points about why the law doesn't allow you to sack people like that, but yeah, very, very difficult for the church.
Yeah. Now, we'd love to hear what you think. Send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's the news with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 9:30. The top story from the newsroom this hour. Well, the government is under growing pressure to label China a national security threat. That's after claims that a suspected Chinese spy had ties to the Duke of York. Yang Tengbo, who denies those allegations, is accused of being part of a wider effort by Beijing to infiltrate UK institutions, with MPs warning thousands may be involved. Ministers are being urged to fast-track a new foreign influence scheme and put China under stricter scrutiny, a move that could spark retaliation from Beijing. Labour says the UK is ready to act, but hasn't confirmed any tougher measures so far. It all follows a shift in UK-China relations, with Sir Keir Starmer recently meeting Xi Jinping at the G20. In other news, for the first time in over a year, UK wage growth is on the rise, hitting 5.2% in the 3 months to October. But cracks in the jobs market are showing, with 31,000 fewer vacancies and payroll numbers dropping by 35,000 in November. Earnings are now growing faster than inflation by 3%, but concerns are still mounting after the budget's hike in employer national insurance and next year's minimum wage rise. Unemployment, meanwhile, stayed at 4.3%, though changes to the data mean there could be some uncertainty around those figures. Experts say the job market slowdown could deepen in the months ahead. Sarah Sharif's father and stepmother will be sentenced later today for her murder after years of horrific abuse. The 10-year-old was found dead at her home in Woking in Surrey last August, with over 25 broken bones, burns and bite marks from a campaign of violence. Her father, Irfan Sharif, stepmother Bainash Batul and uncle Faisal Malik were found guilty last week, with sentencing expected to be broadcast live from the Old Bailey later. The case has sparked outrage over failures by social services, who dropped investigations just months before Sarah's death. Her mother has called her taken too soon and says Sarah will always be remembered as her princess. And a top Russian general has been killed in a scooter bomb blast in Moscow just a day after Ukraine accused him of war crimes. Igor Kirillov, who was in charge of Russia's nuclear, biological and chemical defence forces, died alongside his assistant when the bomb exploded outside an apartment building early this morning. Ukraine's security service has now reportedly confirmed it was responsible for that killing in a special operation in Moscow. The remotely triggered device, packed with explosives, left the entrance of the apartments in ruins. Scorch marks, shattered windows and debris have been left scattered everywhere. Western nations had previously sanctioned him for deploying so-called barbaric weapons in Ukraine, and and was charged just yesterday with deploying banned chemical arms. Those are the latest headlines for now. A full roundup from the newsroom at 10 o'clock. Now, though, it's back to Miriam and Andrew.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, we've asked this question before, and I think the answer is the same. Is the Church of England in crisis? It most certainly is, because the Archbishop of York, he's number 2 in the hierarchy, Stephen Cottrell, is facing calls to resign from within his own church as it emerged he let a priest, David Tudor, continue his ministerial duties despite having prior knowledge of him paying £10,000 in compensation to a sex abuse victim.
Yes, this priest, David Tudor, was dismissed from clerical duties 2 months ago after admitting abusing 2 teenage girls, though at least 7 women say they were abused by him.
The Church has already lost the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. Remember, that's because he didn't follow up the idea that the police were investigating the guy who ran those camps, John Smythe, who was beating young boys to the point where they had to wear adult nappies because they were bleeding so much. So he's standing down. Can they survive losing the second most senior archbishop in the hierarchy?
And I think this story is almost worse in terms of the hierarchy of the church, because although you could easily criticise Justin Welby for not taking enough action, he claims that he thought it had been referred to the police, whereas this man was a known sex. He had a conviction and was allowed to continue as a priest but not have contact on his own with children.
And he worked under the very close to the bishop, then Bishop of Chelmsford, who is now the Archbishop of York, David Cottrell. And in 2012, Cottrell was told about the fact he'd paid £10,000 to a girl, effectively to shut her up.
Yeah.
And yet he continued to serve in the church for another 8 years on the then Bishop of Chelmsford's watch. Extraordinary.
Yeah,
and then he becomes the Archbishop of York, the second most powerful figure in the church, and then in January he becomes the most powerful because he's temporarily taking over.
Yeah.
So can he survive? Lots of people say he shouldn't.
Yeah. And it is also the consequences for ordinary church members, ordinary priests in the Church of England who are doing a brilliant job and who absolutely have the best interests of their parishioners at heart. It's really, really difficult for them when these stories come out because everybody questions them.
Yeah.
But it just, the Archbishop of York has said that the law didn't allow him to sack this man, but that seems astounding.
Well, he should have suspended him.
Yeah.
He could have suspended him, and he could have gone to the Archbishop, in fact, to say, I want shot him. Let's talk to Father Alex Frost, who's the vicar of St Matthew's, and he's a member of the General Synod of the Church of England. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew. Good morning, Miriam.
Father Frost, this is another sad episode in the recent history of the Church of England. Welby went eventually. He thought he could brazen it out, in my view, but it was when the Bishop of Newcastle spoke out, he stood down. The same Bishop of Newcastle has spoken out now against the Archbishop of York. Has he got to go? And if so, why?
Well, I don't want to jump on the bandwagon, Andrew. I think, I'm as you alluded to a few moments ago, I'm a regular parish priest going about my work. What I would say, it is humiliating and it's embarrassing. And as a parish priest, I want to apologise to your listeners who might be churchgoers who see us as inadequate, inept, incapable of resolving safeguarding matters. I think Stephen Cottrell's a good man at heart. I think he's constricted by the institution. I know that only full well as a member of the General Synod. It's almost impossible to get things done. It's like turning a tanker in a canal. It's so constricting. Yeah. So, but I'm a real advocate of Bishop Helen. She's been a lone voice. I'm astounded that other bishops haven't come forward and added their voice to the debate. I think it goes to the heart of, what we don't talk in this debate, guys, is much about the theology and about Jesus and what we are as Christians. And Jesus calls us to call out injustice and to stand up for the marginalised and the poor. And here's a classic of example where we've failed to do that. Sorry, I just also wanted to say, I'm appalled that a priest can have a licence but can't go near children.
Yes.
It is horrific.
That's right. And of course, you know, as Christians, we would say that there is always room for forgiveness and redemption, yet somebody working as a leader in a church should be beyond reproach. And actually, it's not appropriate at all for somebody with a previous conviction or even suspicions, frankly, to continue working as a priest. And yet the Archbishop of York says that he legally couldn't remove this man until another complaint had been made. Is that correct? Would you be able to remove somebody working for you if you had those suspicions?
There's a procedure to follow, and I have to compliment local dioceses and their safeguarding. You know, there's two parallel universes here within the Church of England, as you've alluded to. There's the senior hierarchy of the institution that is inept in its safeguarding protocols, and there's the localised churches that are following procedures and doing things well. But you know, as a parish priest, I'm in the heart of the busiest time of the year. And most of my work is with children. I've got a school coming in later this morning. I've got a school coming in tomorrow. We've got a Christingle service. It's a real joy and a privilege to be alongside children. But the thought that my reputation and my colleagues' reputation is tarnished by the behaviour of other people that hasn't been acted upon, and they've been allowed to minister, you know, it goes right to the heart of the very top. You know, I think questions need to be asked of the previous Archbishop of Canterbury, George Carey, and his role in this. If you listen to the File on 4 documentary, he was blasé in his capacity to give this guy a kind of a wipe the slate clean. It's abhorrent behaviour, and I fully understand why people call for Stephen Cotterell's head. But bishops need to speak up. I'm on here probably because you can't get bishops to speak. That's probably why I'm here.
Just finally, Father Frost, we're talking about really young girls here who were abused by this terrible man. It was terrible what he did. And the idea that the Archbishop, who's now the second most senior man in the church, was beyond his wit to find a way to get him out of a frontline role. He was working in the cathedral in Chelmsford with him. It's extraordinary. It shows no leadership whatsoever at a time when you guys are on the front line and you desperately need inspiring leadership.
Yeah, I'm not sure who runs our church, if I'm being honest, Andrew. You know, as a member of the General Synod, I attend there, and I see people walking around with their noses in the air, and it's almost like there's another world of people that are actually controlling the church, probably the Archbishop's Council, and they need to be held accountable as well. But unfortunately, much of what is said about what we can do is true. We are constricted by the ecclesiology of the church, and it's very difficult to break that mould, but I hope we can, because I think there's a need for the church in society. We need to have a credible and important role, and this just undermines that all the time.
Well, Father Alex Frost, thank you for all you're doing, and thank you for joining us this morning. That was Father Alex Frost there, Vicar of St Matthew's and a member of the General Synod. Now, the Church of England has issued a statement. They say the appalling abuse committed by former Church of England rector David Tudor is a grievous breach of trust, and we commend the courage of those survivors who came forward.
The current bishops of Chelmsford and Southwark have apologised for the hurt and harm caused by his offences, and an independent safeguarding review will now take place. No reference whatsoever to the Archbishop of York. Useless, inadequate statement, showing yet again lack of leadership by the church.
And I thought it was interesting what the vicar there was saying, that he's not sure who runs the church, but it sounds like HR law runs the Church of England, which is always risk-averse.
Have they heard of ostriches in the Church of England, whoever drew up that statement? Ostrich head buried in the sand. Hopeless.
Very, very sad. Well, still to come. Children's hospices are at risk after the budget, and we'll be checking in on them next. But first, if you're in search of some winter sun, here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations, not UK. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Unsettled at times across western parts of Europe with some stronger winds and perhaps some outbreaks of rain, but elsewhere it should be largely settled. Fairly breezy around Madeira, though largely dry, just a bit cloudy, perhaps some thicker cloud moving into parts of Portugal with a risk of some rain, and also fairly breezy around coasts. But elsewhere it is going to be largely settled, lots of dry weather around, though perhaps just a few showers around northern parts of Italy. And the remaining largely settled as we head into the weekend, just a slight dip in temperatures by Saturday.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's a time for the vegan community to get together, as well as an opportunity for non-vegans to try going plant-based.
Well, joining us now is some of her delicious hummus, and we both love hummus, this is a great thing. This is the founder of Chickpea, Hannah McCollum. Hannah, lovely to meet you. And you've brought in some of your beautiful products in front of you here, so can you talk us through some of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a range of chilled hummus, and then latest to the range of a new ambient snack pot, which is a fridgeless hummus that doesn't require refrigeration. But I started Chickpea because of my love for hummus, but also sustainability and reducing food waste and encouraging people to be more plant-based without saying go vegan.
Does normal, say, traditional hummus have anything that's not vegan appropriate in it?
Not really.
No,
I think
it's always chickpeas, olive oil, maybe some other bits.
Yeah, lemon juice, aquafaba or water to help with consistency, garlic, and rapeseed oil or olive oil.
And there's a bit of a misconception about veganism that I hear a lot, where people say, look, I'm not a vegan, I love my steaks, I'll just get out of there now. But there's a misconception that you don't get the protein, you don't get the fats, and you're kind of just eating processed salads and, fake meat and things. But that's not quite the case, especially with chickpeas, right?
Yeah, I think protein is really important, and actually a lot of people think I need a certain amount of fish every week or meat, but actually a lot of the fish and meat that you're eating are eating higher protein foods, so algae, seaweed, pulses, all these types of plant-based foods. For me, veganism is like you could have a delicious rye seeded bread with just loads of roasted vegetables, seeds, tahini sauce on top.
That sounds
and there's nothing beige in there at all.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning, it's 10 to 10 and this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Well, Rachel Reeves' plans to hike employers' national insurance will hit hospices too, to the tune of nearly £5 million each year.
Well, this means that roughly 1 in 5 hospices around the country are already reducing the services they offer, with some warning that they are at risk of closure.
Our reporter Sophie Reaper is at a hospice in Didsbury.
Good morning, Sophie. Thanks for joining us.
We're here at the Francis. Good morning to you both. We're here at the Francis House Children's Hospice in Greater Manchester. Now, this morning on breakfast, we were talking to the CEO, David Ireland. He was telling us about the situation that they find themselves in financially with that funding cut and with the tax hikes. But let's chat now to the head nurse, who I believe is here in the Red Room, to get a little bit more information. Very good morning to you, about the day-to-day running here at Francis House. Now, thank you very much for joining us. What goes on here on a day-to-day, and why is it so important that your funding continues as it is?
Every day is different. We look at individualised care for each family.
And the difference with hospice care and hospital care is that we look at the whole family and we look at it from a holistic point of view. So it's not just about the needs in regarding of their illness, it's their emotional well-being, the things that they need within the community for that, ongoing support. We support siblings as well as the child, and everybody is impacted. When you have a child with a life-threatening or a life-limiting condition, it impacts the whole family, and hospice care involves the whole family and supports the whole family. It's not just about the child.
Well, we heard earlier from David that Francis House is in a fairly secure position, which is great. But obviously there aren't that many children's hospices around. I think there's about 54 UK-wide. What happens if other hospices close? I know that you've had an influx of children already, so what situation does that put you in if other hospices are forced to close?
You don't want to end up in a position where you're turning children away. The last thing you want is to turn children away for end-of-life care or support at their most desperate time of need, and you can't do it for everybody. You need every hospice to be able to cover each area and support in each area. So the more services that are closed will impact any hospices that are left open. We want to extend the services, so we're getting more of an influx of children that are needing end-of-life care in the community. There's more of a need for that, and we want to be able to support the community services to be able to allow them to die at home if that's the wish of the family, and we can only do that if the funding's there.
Let me just really quickly ask you, we're running out of time, what can families do if there is no children's hospice near them? Is it simply a matter of travelling or, like you say, just dying without the support that they need? What is the option?
Well, dying without the support. The NHS can't meet the needs of families at that time. Dying in a hospital, sometimes it is choice of families, that's choice if they are already in the hospital, but hospitals are already on the needs. There's already waiting areas. People are in A&E for 10 hours a day. If you have a child where their condition deteriorates and you've got to take them to A&E and you're sat in A&E for 12 hours in some circumstances, whereas the other option is in a hospice environment, in a very homely environment, and being supportive in a holistic way and looking at the needs of the family, and they're getting that symptom control quickly. So I think it would be really, really sad if hospices couldn't continue. I think there's a real need that needs to continue, and they need to put the fund in there.
Sharon, thank you so much for joining us this morning. There you are, a real postcode lottery situation that we find ourselves in with our hospices. Either they get the support, or as Sharon said, people could face not having that support.
Sophie, thanks so much for that report. Well, still to come, the father and stepmother who murdered 10-year-old Sarah Sharif are due to be sentenced today in the Old Bailey. Don't miss it. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, and next we have your weather with Honor.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Gradually turning more unsettled from the west with strengthening winds and also some outbreaks of rain moving in, but it is going to be largely mild for the time of year. Fairly settled across the south and southeast, though plenty of cloud and perhaps some quite murky conditions across the southeast to start, with some fog around hilly areas, and gradually turning more unsettled from the west as we see outbreaks of rain across parts of Scotland, and then later on moving into parts of Northern Ireland and western parts of England and Wales. This could be quite heavy and persistent at times, particularly in the afternoon across northern parts of Scotland, and it is going to turn more and more blustery from the west throughout the day too, but those temperatures generally holding up between the low double digits. As we finish off the day, those outbreaks of rain set to continue, turning heavy at times around western and northern parts of Scotland, and still those blustery winds, particularly around coastal areas. Outbreaks of rain continuing too across Northern Ireland, western parts of northern England too, and turning very blustery through into the Irish Sea Channel as well. And once again, those outbreaks of rain for western parts of Wales and southwest England, where once again this could turn heavy for a time. Across the far southeast, it will stay dry, but then gradually we'll see more and more of that rain move its way eastwards as we head into overnight, and turning blustery for most across the country, particularly around those western coasts and northern coasts of Scotland too. But with those winds and plenty of cloud and outbreaks of rain, that's going to hold temperatures up around the high single figures. Heading into tomorrow, it's another unsettled day ahead with outbreaks of rain starting to creep in from the west, turning clearer across Scotland, though plenty of blustery showers moving through here. These could turn wintry across high ground. And then once again, we'll see another change from the southwest as further strong winds and heavy outbreaks of rain start to move in here. So gradually turning more and more unsettled, the best of the brightness across the far east. That's it from me. Bye-bye for now.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M8 in Glasgow, all lanes have reopened eastbound at junction 25 at Cardonald after an accident. Still long delays though, it's been taking over an hour in queues back beyond junction 29 at St James. The A1 in Northumberland is blocked southbound by an accident south of Alnwick, causing queues. In County Durham, the A19 is closed northbound from the A67 Craythorne junction after an accident, with delays towards there and as you divert. On the M606 in West Yorkshire, there's a lane closed southbound where someone's broken down between junctions 2 and 1 towards the M62, causing queues heading away from Bradford. The port of Holyhead remains closed for emergency repairs. On the M2 in Kent, there's a lane closed on the westbound exit at junction 5 at Sittingbourne after an accident, with queues towards there. And in Cornwall, the A30 is closed eastbound at Cambourne after an accident last night, causing delays. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the biggest, greatest Great British giveaway so far, with your chance to win a spectacular £50,000 in tax-free cash. 2025 could be amazing, with plenty of treats, holidays and fun on the horizon. How would you enjoy that cash? £50,000 will make someone our biggest ever winner. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 a.m. on Tuesday the 17th of December. Live across the United Kingdom, this is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and me, Miriam Cates, standing in for Bev Turner.
So the father and stepmother who brutally murdered 10-year-old Sarah Sharif will be sentenced any moment now. This comes as parents could lose the automatic right to teach their children at home.
And the Archbishop of York is refusing calls to resign as he's slammed over his handling of a sex abuse case. Can the Church of England survive the fall of another Archbishop?
Exiled Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, will miss Sandringham Christmas celebrations after all with the royal family following that mortally embarrassing links to the Chinese spy scandal.
And the Children's Commissioner for England, Dame Rachel de Souza, wants a smacking ban, like they have in Scotland and Wales. Is smacking your child an effective method of discipline, or does it encourage violent behaviour in later life? We'll be debating that.
And a convicted terrorist is suing a pub called the Saracen's Head Inn, saying he was deeply offended by its sign. But now the landlord is fighting back, and we're going to have the latest.
I think the call for a smacking ban is interesting. This always happens after tragic cases. People think, how could we change the law to stop this happening again? But sadly, there are some people out there who would abuse their children, whatever the law was.
That's what I think. And also, how do you enforce it? They've got a smacking ban in Scotland and Wales. I don't think there's been a single prosecution.
No, exactly. And also, when you have small children, you have to use physical force to keep them safe, don't you? Whether that's forcing them into a car seat if they don't want to. Where do you draw the line?
What parent would do something like that?
Well, quite. Mine are so big now, I couldn't force them to do anything even if I wanted to. But yeah, we'd love to hear what you think. So do send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's the news with Sam Francis.
Miriam, Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning to you. It's 2 minutes past 10. The top story, well, the government is under growing pressure today to label China a national security threat. That is after claims a suspected Chinese spy had ties to the Duke of York. Yang Tengbo, who denies those allegations, is accused of being part of a wider effort by Beijing to infiltrate UK institutions, with MPs warning thousands may be involved. Ministers are being urged to fast-track a new foreign influence scheme and put China under stricter scrutiny, a move that could spark retaliation from Beijing. Labour, though, says the UK is ready to act, but hasn't confirmed any tougher measures so far. It follows a shift in UK-China relations, with Sir Keir Starmer recently meeting Xi Jinping at the G20. Sarah Sharif's father and stepmother are set to be sentenced shortly for her murder after years of what the judge described as horrific abuse. The 10-year-old was found dead at her home in Surrey last August, with over 25 broken bones, burns and bite marks from a campaign of violence. Her father, Irfan Sharif, stepmother Bainash Batul and uncle Faisal Malik were found guilty last week, with sentencing due to be broadcast live from the Old Bailey. We will bring that to you as soon as it takes place. Well, the case has sparked outrage over failures by social services who dropped investigations just months before Sarah's death. Her mother has called her taken too soon and says Sarah will always be remembered as her princess. And the automatic right to home educate at-risk children could be scrapped under new legislation being introduced today. The Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill follows that case of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif, whose family removed her from school before her murder last year. The bill would give local authorities new powers to ensure that children in any unsafe environments attend school and create a national register for children not in education. Charities say the funding promised for family support falls far short of what's needed. But Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson says too many children have been failed by the state, and says the proposals are a big moment for child protection.
The measures that I'm setting out today are about how we protect children and keep them safe, that we've got much clearer visibility of where children are and where parents make a request to home educate their children, where they take them out of school, that if we have safeguarding concerns or a child protection investigation is underway, we'll make sure that local councils are able to deny that request that parents have if they're concerned about the well-being of children. There's a range of other measures in the bill that we're setting out today about how we all need to work together to share information, whether that's police, health, education, to really work to protect children and to keep them safe. It's a landmark piece of legislation.
And for the first time in over a year, UK wage growth is on the rise, hitting 5.2% in the 3 months to October. But cracks in the jobs market are showing, with 31,000 fewer vacancies and payroll numbers dropping by 35,000 in November. Earnings are now growing faster than inflation by 3%, but concerns are mounting after the budget's hike in employer national insurance and next year's minimum wage rise. Unemployment, meanwhile, stayed at 4.3%, though changes to data mean some uncertainty around those figures. Experts say the jobs market slowdown could deepen in the months ahead. Those are the latest headlines for now. Your next update in around half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and me, Miriam Cates. Now, let's see what you've been saying. You've been sending in your comments on gbnews.com/your say. Sam says the Archbishop of York should be sacked, not resign. He'd have to sack himself, though, wouldn't he? Because he's the most senior cleric now.
Welby technically is still senior, but as it took a long time for him to do the right thing, maybe it's down to the king. I'm not sure what happens. Who sacks an archbishop? Lots of you talking about the Saracens pub head, because this convicted terrorist, outrageous, isn't it, suing over because it offends his feelings. The pub landlord fighting about. Pete says, in regard to the Saracens head pub, nonsense. Quite right, Pete. We should never bend the knee to people like this chancer who's trying to get money from the pubs, and pubs are struggling as it is.
That's right. I think there are two problems here. One is that people get too easily offended. And the other is that because we have such, crazy HR inequalities and everything now, there are actually opportunities for chancellors to sue people, even if they're not genuinely offended.
Yeah. I think we should read out what Rob says, though. Prince Andrew's getting a really bad deal. Just when he needs them most, his family are turning against him. You sort of feel sorry for him, don't you?
I do, because regardless of how unwise you think he's been in his public life, he's still... a human being, a father, son, brother. They're his only family.
He has been stupid.
Well, maybe, haven't we all? I mean, maybe not that stupid, but I mean, there's a very strong case for him not having a public role. But to deny him his private life as a family man as well, I think that's
the trouble is going to that church service on Christmas Day is a very public event.
It is, but I don't think appearing in you don't choose your family, and appearing in public with your brother or
and
father
forgiveness,
is
redemption.
Not. Yeah, exactly. Appearing in public with somebody is not saying that you agree with everything they've done in your life. It's just this is my brother. That is.
I wonder if other people agree that Prince Andrew is getting a raw deal. Do let us know.
Probably not.
Yeah. Well, or maybe Miriam's in a minority again.
Normally. Well, the Conservatives have launched a petition for the government to scrap their family farm tax.
So our reporter Adam Cherry has spoken to the Shadow Environment Secretary Victoria Atkins, and she had this to say to him.
Victoria Atkins, why is there a cow behind you this morning?
Well, we have brought this beautiful calf to College Green in Westminster to try to get the Chancellor, the Prime Minister and the Labour government to listen to farming families such as Bella's family. Bella is 12. She's come today to try to make them understand that their hateful family farm tax is going to destroy farming families and farming across the United Kingdom.
And tell us a little bit about the petition that you were showing off just a little minute ago.
Very much so. So since this tax was announced by Rachel Reeves in her budget, we have set up a petition called Stop the Family Farm Tax, and we now have 215,000 signatures on this petition. That's a lot of people who've taken the trouble to sign the petition. I'd encourage people to keep joining up and signing, but we're doing this again to try to ensure that this city-dwelling government listens to rural communities. I'm very proud to represent a Lincolnshire constituency. We help feed the nation, and yet the farmers in my constituency and indeed across the United Kingdom are telling us how worried they are that this tax is going to destroy farms. And this matters to us all, because even if we live in the centre of a city like Rachel Reeves and the city-dwelling City Steve Reed, the DEFRA secretary, they still need to eat food, and it's our farmers that grow it. So if farming is broken and they break it, then that will affect us all.
Victoria Atkins there. Well, joining us in the studio now is political commentator Kai Wilshaw. Sorry, I got your name wrong there. Kai, do you think that Labour are now regretting this move on farming inheritance tax?
Look, I don't think they expected quite the furore that we've seen. That's, it's been eking out over months and months now. Now, of course, nobody should know better than the Shadow Secretary of State that the public finances are in a dire situation, because she was, of course, she was Secretary of State for Health, and prior to that, she was in the Treasury. So I'm not surprised that she's taking this tack against the Labour government after the mess they've left Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. However, I think the debate has been pretty lamentable, hasn't it? And I think one good thing about this petition, which I welcome actually, is that we will now have a debate in Parliament where we can actually tear apart these finances, see if there's a better way to implement this policy, because Dan Needle, the tax policy campaigner, has now come out and said, actually, there is a better way to do this. And so hopefully we'll get into the nitty-gritty in that debate. But, comments like this from the Shadow Secretary don't really help.
It's interesting because the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs say X amount of farms will be affected, and the Treasury say half that will be affected. Yeah. How can two wings of government, the same government, be so far apart?
Well, and even worse, we have these nefarious actors out there who are trying to peddle disinformation, saying that 70,000 farms will be affected. Now, that's a third of all British farms. The Treasury, of course, say it's between 100 and 500 farms. But that's exactly it, isn't it? The public debate has been lamentable, and we've got all these figures flying around trying to make people think that actually British farming is going to collapse pretty much if this policy goes into effect. Now, that's not the case, but certainly there are farms out there that will be affected that shouldn't be part of this net, and British farmers that will lose out if this policy is implemented.
Even if it was only 500 farms that were affected, that's 500 too many.
Well, it's 500...
Small farms.
500 estates, I should say.
Yeah, but it's generations of experience here. That's what we lose if they're forced to sell, which you can't get back. Keir Starmer did tell the National Farmers Union conference last year, Kai, he said farming is different. We can't lose one farm, because if you lose one farm, it doesn't come back.
Yeah, they're totally right.
But his policy is going to cause a lot more than one farm.
I think that's what is quite hard for people to stomach, is that until the election, Labour were actually saying that they weren't going to do this. Do you think there's almost been an oversight here in a lack of understanding of how farms work, because the Treasury can look at these estates on paper and think that's worth £5 million. But of course, that money's not realised unless the farm is sold, and then it's not a farm anymore. Do you think there's a basic lack of understanding of how farming works?
I think there is that issue, and I think that's across parties in Parliament, frankly. I don't think that's a Labour Party issue. You know, we've lost a lot of working class background MPs, for instance, since 1982. You know, we've got about a third of what we had then. So that's another example of where Parliament, is it representing people? Maybe not. But I think the other problem, and obviously one way you can combat that, is by bringing in experts. Now, frankly, the budget was a couple of months after a pretty torrid election campaign, and there hasn't been the time, I don't think, put into this policy to figure out exactly how you capture the tax dodgers who do use this relief as a means of avoiding tax, but then also protect British farms. And I think they haven't found that. Hopefully a parliamentary debate will find a middle ground.
Yeah, the danger as well is if the farmers go the French route. In France, the farmers completely hold the country to ransom, and if they stop digging up the food and milking the cows, we get a food shortage. The government will be blamed for that.
And at the worst possible time, as we go into this winter, when already lots of people are going to be struggling. You know, as much as I think lots of people sort of gleefully rub their hands at the prospect of a French-style protest, I'm hoping that's not the way it goes, because actually the disruption to our food supply could be enormous.
And the farmers have said that themselves, haven't they? That they don't want to punish the British public for what they see as a government decision. But I think, where do you think this will end? Because the farmers have been extraordinarily well organised and well behaved. They've cleaned up the streets after them. They've not done anything illegal. They've given out food to food banks. They have they have the public on their side. You know, how long will Labour be able to ignore this? Do you think there is a possibility of some minor tweaks or U-turns, as you said?
Well, U-turns is exactly what I think the Tory party are trying to push for, isn't it? They want a policy win and U-turn so that then they can batter Keir Starmer with that for the next few months. Look, I think ideally, Labour do tweak this policy as a result of the parliamentary debate, and hopefully they are taking advice from experts and from farmers themselves. I'm not sure you don't see that dialogue play out in the public debate. Hopefully that is happening behind closed doors. Surely that's how it has to end, because I don't think that the farmers are giving up here. It's already been months, so it's not going away.
You're instinctively on the left here, Kai. What do you make of the poll yesterday by Ipsos, which showed Starmer at this stage in his government is the most unpopular Prime Minister in modern times, even more unpopular than Margaret Thatcher in the first year of her premiership. Boy, I remember that time. She was very, very unpopular. Are you surprised, disappointed?
I'm trying to take each day as they come, and I imagine that this government has made a conscious decision to make very difficult decisions now that they hope will bear fruit in 5 years' time, because they're not going away. These ridiculous petitions trying to get the change of government or an election. I mean,
isn't it not so much deliberate decisions, more like terrible mistakes?
I wouldn't say so, but of course I would say that, wouldn't I? They've had a really bad time, and I think it was inevitable. Frankly, I think that former Conservative ministers know that in their hearts of hearts. They know that they've left the place in the Treasury in a dire state. But you know, there are decisions that were own goals by this government, and I think that's those key big decisions that have hit the news, you know, hitting pensioners, hitting farmers. I think that is why you're seeing these terrible poll numbers. But I think they'll improve. They'll improve. New ways.
We'll keep you to that.
Kai, thank you so much for joining us. I just wonder if, because the last government was so unpopular, Labour thought that just by not being the Conservatives, they would get an easy ride.
Well, that's how they won the election, because they weren't the Tories. The Tories, Labour didn't win the election, the Tories lost it because they were so awful.
Yes. Well, no comment.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, because of course Miriam was part of the Tory administration.
Anyway, at GB News, we love to hear what you think. Every day we're running our poll of the day. Today we're asking, should hospices be exempt from the Chancellor's National Insurance hike?
We'll be bringing you the live results throughout the day, so make sure to stay tuned. The final result will be announced later in Martin Daubney's show.
And for all our latest polls, news and how to vote, just go to gbnews.com/poll.
Up next, Brussels taking Britain to the European Court of Justice over our Brexit deal. So much for Sir Keir Starmer's relationship reset with the EU. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
After the Hollywood ending that Wrexham Football Club have got, can Chorley FC benefit from a bit of the old celebrity magic dust?
I can't see why not. The guys have been down a few times now, and when they do come down, obviously they're bringing that with them. A little town like Chorley doesn't see much of the charts and big stars, so it's really nice to see them, and we always welcome them when they do come down.
And Mark, give us a flavour of the level of football. I understand you're in the National League North, right? That's 6 rungs down from the top flight. I mean, you're only just down the road from Manchester City, right? But I mean, give us a flavour of the two different worlds between your club and Man City.
Our players are all part-timers. So we've got kind of fitness coaches, we've got teachers, we've got all kinds of players who have full-time jobs alongside playing. Our average crowd is probably a tenth of what you get at Man City, probably even less than that. We get about 1,500 on a home game. The thing is, we know where we are and we understand where we are, and we are a real community club. Tonight, I'm ready now. I'm off to Marine, so off over to Merseyside. Playing the likes of Liverpool and Everton over on Merseyside would be kind of a dream come true. But we know where we are. We would just love to get to the Football League. So teams like Salford, Stockport County were in our division a couple of years ago, all flying now in the Football League. We just want to do the same. We sat down with the board last year and they told us the vision for the future, and that vision most definitely is that we want to be a Football League club. When we went to the Premier League, I know the boys have been saying that they 30 years we'll be in the Premier League and winning it. Well, let's hope we are, and let's hope I'm still around to see that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 10:20, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce, Miriam Cates. We have our panel with us, the former Labour MP Luciana Berger, Piers Pottinger, former Public Affairs Supremo, political commentator, advisor to various Tory leaders, with us together. I know something, Piers. I don't know how well you'd like you to admit this, but you are a former advisor to a man who's much in the news at the moment, His Royal Highness the Duke of York.
Indeed,
Prince Andrew.
yes.
Before I ask you about this position he's got himself in, did you think he was a nice bloke?
I think he was always very nice to me.
Right.
He was always very polite to me. I know he could be difficult, but a lot of people can be difficult.
Yeah.
I can be difficult.
Yeah.
But in this case, I think he is the victim, very much so. After all, no one's accusing him of spying. It's the Chinese spy who, first of all, should not have been allowed to get as far as he did. And secondly, now that... And don't forget, this was in 2021 when he was stopped re-entering the country. So that's 3 years ago, nearly 4 years ago now. And he has appealed, and it's only become public because of his appealing. And he has now, because he's not being allowed into the country, the Chinese have taken it upon themselves to vilify Prince Andrew, knowing he's a weak target. So the Chinese, as usual, are laughing all over the place, and we're playing their game.
But why would you think Prince Andrew was friendly with this chap? Was there a financial benefit?
Think Pitch at the Palace, which was very successful here in the UK, was expanded abroad, and if the Asian, not just Chinese in China, but Chinese in Singapore and Hong Kong, are very big investors internationally. And this was seen, I'm sure, as an opportunity to expand the pool of investors in which were predominantly British entrepreneurs. And it was a successful idea. The other reason I think they targeted Prince Andrew was, don't forget, he was still, until very recently, receiving daily, weekly updates from the Ministry of Defence on defence matters and matters pertaining to state, and that was at the behest of our late Queen. And so he was, I'm sure, seen by the Chinese as a vulnerable, easy target. And that's what they have clearly achieved and are still achieving, embarrassing us, causing us problems by the coverage that we've given this. And let's be clear, Prince Andrew's is really, in my view, for once, a genuine victim here himself. And I also feel at Christmas, as Camilla said earlier, I see no reason why on earth he shouldn't spend Christmas with his family. Christmas is a Christian festival, a time for forgiveness, coming together of the family, and this is nothing to do, this whole Chinese business, nothing to do with that. And in fact, the Chinese will be laughing their socks off at the mileage they've managed now to get out of this failed attempt by the Chinese spy, because clearly he has not achieved anything. They've stopped him, but they should have stopped him earlier.
Luciana, do you feel sorry for Prince Andrew? Is he a victim?
I don't feel sorry for Prince Andrew. I do think it's not office that he holds, but the status that he holds as a member of the royal family comes an enormous amount of responsibility. And I have sympathy for all members of the royal family, because you don't get a choice, but that responsibility exists. And let's not forget, this is a conversation perhaps for another time, but there are other matters in which Prince Andrew has got himself involved, which most people that I speak to are utterly appalled by in terms of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. That's a separate matter, but certainly,
well, we should remind people he paid £12 million to Virginia Giuffre, a woman he says he doesn't have any recollection of meeting.
Indeed, and certainly I found that whole episode appalling. On this matter, I think again that responsibility, having that access, as we know that he's had, to high levels of security information and matters, comes a level of responsibility.
MPs have been targeted by the Chinese and have fallen foul to. Not. Of course, you can say in hindsight he should have been wiser, but on the other hand, if he no longer has the kind of infrastructure behind him vetting people.
Well, he's only had the infrastructure at that time, and he's in a different position today, but we know that this dates back to a number of years ago, so he would have had that infrastructure. And it's not just his responsibility, certainly it's other people around him also. But again, you have to go beyond the levels of concern to make sure that you're doing everything possible to make sure that you know who it is that you're engaging with and connected to. And certainly on one of the front pages of the newspapers today, there is some suggestion, and I haven't been able to interrogate it further, that there was some financial relationship also that existed between these two individuals.
Yeah, I think with him, he was helping to set up schools styled on Gordonston in Scotland, which is where Prince Philip went to school and where Prince Charles very unhappily went to school, and he would, of course, get a cut.
Yeah, so I mean...
But is he not allowed to earn money?
No, I don't think that's right about Gordonstoun, no. I think what the newspaper was talking about was the 2% fee for investors, finding investors, that came as part... I haven't seen the Chinese pitch at the palace structure, but I know what the UK one was. And what I would say is that, again, there's no evidence at all at the moment that Prince Andrew personally benefited financially from this. And the papers are being very careful not to say that, quite rightly.
Do you
and also, he met this man originally through diplomatic official channels. And he was quite therefore... And don't forget, this man was photographed with 2 former prime ministers. He moved in very auspicious circles. He was a spy who had successfully penetrated our highest levels of government. And this is what the security services should be looking at. And we should be focusing on their failure in this case, rather than blaming Andrew for being spied upon.
Before we change subject, we have to say, of course, alleged spy. Do you think he's right to have been pulled out of Christmas at Sandringham?
Well, that's a matter...
Pulled out or withdrew of his own accord?
Certainly, that's a matter within families to determine who does or doesn't get an invite.
Pretty public family.
Around the Christmas table. And again, there are, as we've just discussed, there are other elements for consideration about, I think, the disgrace I think he's brought to the royal family in terms of not just this matter but other matters.
Shall we move on to another story? So, Luciana, you've identified this piece in the Telegraph about Brussels taking Britain...
I think our producers
OK, well, I understand.
Well, they knew you'd be
willing to
passionate
talk about it. Brussels is to take Britain to the European Court of Justice over the Brexit deal. Not this again.
Oh, no.
What do you think about this story?
So there's a few things. I mean, certainly this specific case dates back to the transition period. So it's inherited by this current government, the new government, but it's something that is a spillover from what happened during the transition period. And I have some sympathy for the fact that I certainly know some European nationals who, at the time, were held at, when they came back into the country, having visited family or gone on a holiday, and come back into the UK and were facing deportation orders. And that was certainly not... what should have happened during that period. And that was essentially, against the rules at that time. There's also some very technical considerations in this case about some treaties with 6 European nations as well, and which were kind of in contravention of what was happening in that period. So, there are laws in place, and if things are flouted, then every jurisdiction has a right to examine those cases. And this case in particular is because they're not happy with the response that they had from the UK government.
Piers, red flag to the both to you?
Well, I think this is a non-story, really. It's the European Commission trying to rattle their sabre and the EU trying to just penalise Britain for Brexit. I mean, as they refuse to accept it, as indeed Keir Starmer refuses to accept it.
I don't accept
it. And he is already, from the leaked reports, the deal he's trying to strike, the new deal with the EU, is terrifying. We're going to let in 18 to 30-year-olds to come in freely, work here, get the NHS free
movement back.
Free movement for people. 18 to 30, that's a very interesting age group.
Yeah.
On top of which, they're going to destroy our fishermen's livelihoods as well. And what's more, Starmer is doing this. Again, it's sort of by the back door. He didn't admit this during his manifesto, and he's trying to get us back into the EU, which would be catastrophic.
Let's be very clear.
He can't get worse for Starmer. Right. He's already at the bottom of the heap.
No.
Right.
Let's be very clear. Yeah. So the moment that we find ourselves in specifically is that the trade agreement was due for review. That had to happen as part of the process. And the Labour Party has been very clear that we're not going to see a return to the customs union, we're not going to see a return to the single market, and we're not going to see a return of free movement.
Except for 18 to 13-year-olds.
No, but he's ruled that out. Now, listen, he's ruled that out.
Right.
He's ruled that out. Now, I actually would attest as someone who benefited from being able to live, travel and work work in a European country in my 20s, that's a great thing, and then we should be encouraging that. But actually, the government has said that that is not going to happen. I would love it to happen, but it's not. So let's be very clear what's at discussion here. Now, what the government is seeking to do, and I think rightly so, when you speak to small and medium enterprises and businesses in this country, or large businesses, what's the biggest challenge? It's around issues around trade, and the fact that we've got businesses in this country that, if they trade with our European neighbours, are spending exponential amount of time, resources and money with all the additional processes that are now, have flowed. That was never the intention of Brexit. That was never what people were told. And it's actually having very serious repercussions for us commercially. And I think that should be addressed.
On that point,
yes,
we have to let you two come back to resume the battle because it's time for the headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It is just coming up to 32 minutes past 10. Well, 3 members of Sarah Sharif's family are now in the dock at the Old Bailey for sentencing following the 10-year-old's tragic death. Her father, Irfan Sharif, and stepmother, Bainash Batul, were convicted of her murder, while her uncle, Faisal Malik, was found guilty of causing or allowing her death. Sarah's body was found last August in Woking, showing signs of extreme abuse, including over 25 broken bones, burns and bite marks. The case has sparked outrage over failures in the social services system, which dropped investigations just months before her death. Sarah's mother has described her daughter as taken too soon and says she will always be remembered as her princess. Well, the automatic right to home educate children who are deemed at risk could be scrapped under new legislation being introduced in Parliament. The Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill follows the case of Sarah Sharif, whose family removed her from school before her murder last year. It would give local authorities new powers to ensure children in unsafe environments do attend school and create a national register for children not in education. Charities, though, warn the funding promised for family support services falls far short, they say, of what's needed. But Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson says too many children have already been failed by the state and says these proposals are a seminal moment for child protection.
The measures that I'm setting out today are about how we protect children and keep them safe, that we've got much clearer visibility of where children are and where parents make a request to home educate their children, where they take them out of school, that if we have safeguarding concerns or a child protection investigation is underway, we'll make sure that local councils are able to deny that request that parents have if they're concerned about the well-being of children. There's a range of other measures in the bill that we're setting out today about how we all need to work together to share information, whether that's police, health, education, to really work to protect children and to keep them safe. It's a landmark piece of legislation.
Stop creating trouble. That is China's message to the UK as tensions flare over spying accusations. Beijing has slammed what it called anti-China clamours from British MPs, accusing them of spreading lies and damaging relations. It comes after Yang Tengbo, alleged to be a Chinese spy with links to Prince Andrew, was banned from the UK. MPs are now pushing for stricter controls on foreign influence, while the government insists it's stepping up security. The row threatens to derail recent progress, though, including Sir Keir Starmer's landmark meeting with President Xi Jinping last month. Well, that ongoing row over Chinese spying in the UK has just taken another twist. We're hearing breaking news this morning that Christine Lee, accused by MI5 of working on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party, has lost her legal bid to challenge the security services. You may remember the story of Christine Lee being accused back in 2022 of political interference and activities here in the UK's Parliament. MI5's warning at the time led to widespread concerns over foreign interference in British politics. So that news just into us. Christine Lee, accused by MI5 of working on behalf of China, has lost her legal bid to challenge the security services. And just before I hand you back to Andrew and Miriam, a piece of breaking sports news to bring you as well. Chelsea's Mykhailo Mudryk is at the centre of a doping investigation after a routine drugs test has flagged an adverse finding. The FA alerted Chelsea, who have confirmed that news this morning. Mudryk says he has never knowingly taken any banned substances and is working with the Football Association to find out what happened, he says. Chelsea, in response, has also said it will be fully supporting regular testing and is standing by its players as investigations continue. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in around half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, still to come, it looks like a smacking ban will not be included in the government's new child welfare bill. But how effective has it been in Scotland and Wales? We'll be debating that next. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Gradually turning more unsettled from the west with strengthening winds and also some outbreaks of rain moving in, but it is going to be largely mild for the time of year. Fairly settled across the south and southeast, though plenty of cloud and perhaps some quite murky conditions across the southeast to start with some fog around hilly areas, and gradually turning more unsettled from the west as we see outbreaks of rain across parts of Scotland and then later on moving into parts of Northern Ireland and western parts of England and Wales. This could be quite heavy and persistent at times, particularly in the afternoon across northern parts of Scotland, and it is going to turn more and more blustery from the west throughout the day too, but those temperatures generally holding up between the low double digits. As we finish off the day, those outbreaks of rain set to continue, turning heavy at times around western and northern parts of Scotland, and still those blustery winds, particularly around coastal areas. Outbreaks of rain continuing too across Northern Ireland, western parts of northern England too, and turning very blustery through into the Irish Sea Channel as well. And once again, those outbreaks of rain for western parts of Wales and southwest England, where once again this could turn heavy for a time. Across the far southeast, it will stay dry, but then gradually we'll see more and more of that rain move its way eastwards as we head into overnight and turning blustery for most across the country, particularly around those western coasts and northern coasts of Scotland too. But with those winds and plenty of cloud and outbreaks of rain, that's going to hold temperatures up around the high single figures. Heading into tomorrow, it's another unsettled day ahead with outbreaks of rain starting to creep in from the west, turning clearer across Scotland, though plenty of blustery showers moving through here. These could turn wintry across high ground. And then once again, we'll see another change from the southwest as further strong winds and heavy outbreaks of rain start to move in here. So gradually turning more and more unsettled, the best of the brightness across the far east. That's it from me. Bye-bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. The A1 in Northumberland is blocked each way by an accident between Alnwick and Morpeth, causing queues. In County Durham, the A19 is closed northbound at the Craythorne junction after an accident. Queues towards there and delays on the A67 as you divert. The port of Holyhead remains closed for emergency repairs. Sailing suspended between Holyhead and Dublin. In Lincolnshire, the A15 is closed each way between Market Deeping and Langtoft after an accident causing delays. In Northamptonshire, the A14 is partly blocked westbound between Kettering and Rothwell, causing queues. The M11 in Essex is blocked northbound by an accident at junction 6 for the M25 with queues towards there. In Kent, the A21 is closed each way between Lamberhurst and Flimwell, causing long delays. Eurotunnel report a wait of up to half an hour at Folkestone. And in Cornwall, the A30 is closed eastbound at Camborne after an accident last night.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 10:39. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Kate. And we're joined by former... No, we're not.
No,
we've had our panel and we've had our news. So we're moving on.
We're going to talk about smacking.
We are, because the Children's
Whoever
Commissioner...
put that up on the audio is going to be smacked, whatever the law is in this country, because they deserve it. Because the Children's Commissioner for England, Dame Rachel de Souza, she says the smacking ban we've got in Scotland and Wales should be extended to England.
Well, currently it is unlawful for a parent or carer in England to smack their child, except where this amounts to reasonable punishment. But is smacking your child an effective method of discipline, or does it encourage violent behaviour in later life? And do these bans actually work?
Let's talk to the journalist Hilary Freeman and Deputy Director of the Christian Institute, Simon Calvert, who join us to debate this issue. Good morning to you both. Let's go ladies first, if I can be old-fashioned. What's your view?
I think that there should definitely be a smacking ban. There is in many other countries in Europe. basically, children are not your property. You're not allowed to go out and hit somebody else. If you're on a train and someone annoys you or they misbehave, you can't spank them, you can't slap them or kick them or punch them. You'd get arrested for assault. So why is it different with children? Why are we allowed to hit children?
Well, but Hilary, don't you accept, though, that children are very, very different to adults? You also can't force an adult to be strapped into a pushchair if they don't want to. A parent has to use some sort of physical force or restraint, particularly when children are small.
Well, I don't think that you have to be violent in order to get a child into a pushchair. Corporal punishment is usually used. I have a 9-year-old child, so I've been there. I know what it's like. I've never hit my child. I've never needed to hit my child, and I just don't see why. It's not a valid argument. If you're, it's just bad parenting. And usually what it is losing control. When people hit their child, it's because they've lost control. It's not about teaching them how right from wrong, because hitting someone, being hit, does not teach you anything. I mean, so let's say they can't get you into the pushchair, so they manhandle you a bit. So what happens when you steal a sweet? Do they hit you harder? And then if you do something really bad, they knock you out? It doesn't teach you anything other than violence.
Let's bring Simon Calvert in. Simon, do respond to that, because I imagine you disagree with probably much all of it.
I mean, it's hard to know where to start. I mean, I don't think Hillary's being fair by talking about slapping, kicking and punching, which she just did, because, of course, those things are already illegal. I also don't think she's been fair to parents by suggesting that smacking is something that you do when you lose control. I think that's highly patronising to parents. There are plenty of good parents, and I was one of them when my kids were young. You make a judicial decision that having used lots of other techniques, and you talk to your kids and you engage with them and you try and help them to understand. But there's a point where, for certain things, when kids are little, a tap on the back of their hand is just a way of emphasising the seriousness of something. And I want to be very clear here. The law that Hillary wants is a law that criminalises the mildest possible physical interactions between parents and their children. The law is called the reasonable chastisement defence. So slapping, kicking, punching, doing anything that leaves more than temporary reddening of the skin is already illegal. So by definition, the only thing we're going to criminalise, if we change the law in the way that Hillary wants, are the mildest possible interactions. And I just think most people will think that that's wrong. I think that they'll think that that's damaging to families. I think that they'll think that that distracts police and social services from real cases of abuse. And this idea that it teaches violence, again, that's so patronising. 4 out of 5 adults were smacked themselves as children, and they know that it didn't turn them into, brutes constantly out looking for a fight. It's very patronising, and it's very dangerous kind of talk. I think that we should be supporting good parents, not patronising them and terrifying them with a criminal law when they're just trying to do their best for their kids.
Hilary, there is obviously... Sorry, do respond to that, Hilary.
Nobody is going to arrest a parent for giving a little slap on the hand. That's not what it's to do. It's to protect children from more excessive violence. Sarah Sharif's dad... No, because Sarah
If you change the law, how can you stop that from happening?
Punished her and she died. You cannot expect everybody to understand and be able to be reasonable. So you have to outlaw it altogether, because people cannot... if you're angry with your child, you don't sit there and think, what's reasonable? How hard shall I slap her? How hard shall I tap her?
But surely that's a matter of character, as in all our other interactions are with our children. And everything that Sarah Sharif's father did was illegal. The fact that she died is because he behaved in a criminal way. Do you think that people who are already inclined to behave like that towards their children would be stopped by a ban on a slap on the hand?
No, I don't think that violent abusers would be stopped, but they might be recognised sooner. And because children would also know, but it would become part of the culture. That's the thing. You can't change the culture overnight. It's about stopping parents from viewing their children as their property, as as not human beings in their own right who have rights.
Nobody says that children are the property of the parents.
Well, some parents believe that.
It's quite unfair. It's a terrible characterisation. And this idea that you would help identify abusers by filling up the criminal justice and social work system with parents who've done nothing wrong is balmy, frankly.
Well, we're out of time.
Yeah,
we'd like to keep it on,
there.
but thank you very much. That's Hilary Freeman, the journalist, Simon Calvert from the Christian Institute.
I think it's just a total failure to recognise the difference between children and adults.
Yes.
And you have to use physical...
You're going to have a police officer going in someone's house saying, did you smack your child?
Exactly.
I'm arresting you.
Absolutely.
Still to come.
We'll be looking at the declining marriage rates in Britain and the reasons why people aren't tying the knot. But first, if you're in search of some winter sun, here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Unsettled at times across western parts of Europe with some stronger winds and perhaps some outbreaks of rain, but elsewhere it should be largely settled. Fairly breezy around Madeira, though largely dry, just a bit cloudy. Perhaps some thicker cloud moving into parts of Portugal with a risk of some rain, and also fairly breezy around coasts. But elsewhere it is going to be largely settled, lots of dry weather around, though perhaps just a few showers around northern parts of Italy. And the remaining largely settled as we head into the weekend, just a slight dip in temperatures by Saturday.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Up next, we're going to speak to the People's Champion, because that's what he is. He's the landlord of the Saracen's Head in Buckinghamshire, who's fighting back after a convicted terrorist is suing him for his so-called offensive pub sign. Stay with us.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
The Oxford Union speech this week descended into chaos.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a mood on university campuses that people don't realise. And by the way, it's not just confined to universities. I'm sure that the audience will recognise this mood, which is that if you fall out with the wrong people, you're under a huge amount of pressure to shut up or you will be kicked out of polite society. And on this instance, they put on a debate on Israel. Fair, both sides represented. But it was absolutely clear that the people who were asked to defend Israel and say that it wasn't an apartheid state, rather than being given the freedom and the time and so on that an Oxford Union very formal debate allowed you, were effectively being set up as the bad guys. They were treated abysmally. They were, in many instances, they were booed, but they were spat on.
Sworn at,
all of this. So you get the picture. But the main thing I would say is that usually if you're in an Oxford Union debate, there's students on one side of the debate in the audience and students on the other side. But in this instance, there was very few people on the side of those who were trying to defend Israel against these malign and malicious accusations. Why? Because of the intimidation outside and because of the general atmosphere that if you breach a certain code and are seen to be on the wrong side. Now imagine you're 18, 19, and if you are seen to even be listening to somebody who's pro-Israel, you will be cast as a pro-genocide bigot, you will be kicked out of your friendship groups, you'll be maligned with everything awful that's happened in Gaza, and some terrible things have happened in Gaza, by the way, but you won't even be able to ask a question of it.
The People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's 10:50. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Well, that convicted terrorist who's reportedly suing a pub called the Saracen's Head Inn, saying he was deeply offended by its sign.
And yesterday, you might remember Steve Baker, former Tory MP, was on this show, and he said he'd visit the pub, which was very close to where he lives, and he did exactly that. Take a listen to this.
I've come to see a man who's had a hell of a day, a man who's been on the news when he doesn't normally expect it, and that is Robbie at the Saracen's Head. So, Robbie, how you doing?
I'm very good, how are you?
Now, I've got to ask you, how does it feel to have the whole nation on your side?
Incredible, I love the support.
Yeah, and it really has been a lot today.
Oh, completely, yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Well, let's just see what your locals think.
OK.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Saracen's Head.
Well done, Steve Baker, man of his word.
Well, and the landlord himself is trying now to raise money to defend himself against this case.
Yeah, which is good, and people should be giving money. We are hoping to get him on. We've just got a bit of a techno hitch going on. So I'm all in favour of the landlord.
Yeah, but he's...
How dare a convicted terrorist?
I know. It's astonishing.
God's sake.
And so here's the fundraiser that he's launched to try and defend himself.
If you're listening on the radio, we would help you, but I can't read it from here. What does it say?
Historic pub sued for offensive signage, and it's just his fundraiser page. It says he's raised £470 so far, but I think he needs about 1,500.
So is it on a Just Giving page?
Something like that, I think, yes. But it is GoFundMe. But it is quite concerning because I would say how ridiculous it will get thrown out in court, but I'm not convinced it will be. Right, our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, is travelling with the Prime Minister and has the latest.
Welcome to a bitterly cold Tallinn in Estonia, a country that borders Russia. The Prime Minister is on the final day of his 2-day trip. It is the absolute last foreign trip of 2024, his team assures me. He's come in for a lot of criticism about what's seen as his jet-setting around the world. They seem to have pretty much lost count of how many trips he's been on, but they are insistent that he is doing this to bring jobs and money back to Britain. They say, frankly, that he'd rather be home, able to see his children, but they say he's doing this for growth, something that we haven't seen much of, but the government still says is their central mission. So yesterday in Norway, talking about a green industrial partnership, carbon capture storage. They're building a plant on Teesside with £4 billion of Norwegian investment, then across to Estonia, where he's now meeting at this Joint Expeditionary Force Summit. That's a group of 10 Scandinavian and Baltic states, along with Britain, defence and security. Their forces can train together, do military exercises, share good practice, and could, if necessary, be scrambled at short notice to work anywhere in the world. Now, of course, here all the talk is about Russia and Ukraine. We know that Donald Trump wants this war to end. Volodymyr Zelensky himself is admitting the need to start negotiations. Real concern about what this means, and also, of course, defence spending. Estonia spends 3.5%. Lots of countries do not pay that much, don't spend that much in their defence spending. Donald Trump's been very, very critical of that before as well, of course. So also a Europe in flux, because we've had the collapse of the French government, the collapse of the German government. So a very difficult time for Europe and these giant leaders in a state of disarray. So Keir Starmer finishing up today and heading home.
Blimey, aren't we lucky? Keir Starmer's actually going to be in Britain for a few days. Who'd have thought it?
I think he's allowed to do it. Anyway, this is Britain.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Gradually turning more unsettled from the west with strengthening winds and also some outbreaks of rain moving in, but it is going to be largely mild for the time of year. Fairly settled across the south and southeast, though plenty of cloud and perhaps some quite murky conditions across the southeast to start with some fog around hilly areas, and gradually turning more unsettled from the west as we see outbreaks of rain across parts of Scotland and then later on moving into parts of Northern Ireland and western parts of England and Wales. This could be quite heavy and persistent at times, particularly in the afternoon across northern parts of Scotland, and it is going to turn more and more blustery from the west throughout the day too, but those temperatures generally holding up between the low double digits. As we finish off the day, those outbreaks of rain set to continue, turning heavy at times around western and northern parts of Scotland, and still those blustery winds, particularly around coastal areas. Outbreaks of rain continuing too across Northern Ireland, western parts of northern England too, and turning very blustery through into the Irish Sea Channel as well. And once again, those outbreaks of rain for western parts of Wales and southwest England, where once again this could turn heavy for a time. Across the far southeast, it will stay dry, but then gradually we'll see more and more of that rain move its way eastwards as we head into overnight, and turning blustery for most across the country, particularly around those western coasts and northern coasts of Scotland too. But with those winds and plenty of cloud and outbreaks of rain, that's going to hold temperatures up around the high single figures. Heading into tomorrow, it's another unsettled day ahead, with outbreaks of rain starting to creep in from the west, turning clearer across Scotland, though plenty of blustery showers moving through here. These could turn wintry across high ground. And then once again, we'll see another change from the southwest as further strong winds and heavy outbreaks of rain start to move in here. So gradually turning more and more unsettled, the best of the brightness across the far east. That's it from me. Bye-bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
My name is Cliff. And my name is Julie. And we won $25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Morning, 11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 17th of December, live across the UK, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates in for Bev Turner.
Well, the father and stepmother of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif are being sentenced for her murder. As the government steps up protection for the most vulnerable children, will parents lose the automatic rights to home education?
And ministers are under pressure to take concerns about China more seriously as the government is warned the alleged spy Yang Tengbo is not a lone wolf.
And has Prince Andrew been exiled? The Duke of York will miss Sandringham Christmas celebrations with the royal family following the embarrassment over his links to that Chinese spy scandal.
And the Archbishop of York is defying calls to resign as he's criticised by a bishop over his handling of a sex abuse case. Can the Church of England recover from losing another archbishop?
And national insurance rises in Chancellor Rachel Reeves' budget are putting charities at risk as children's hospices reveal that they'll be taking a £5 million annual hit. Yes, we're going to be discussing the collapse, really, in marriage rates in the UK since the 70s. Hardly anybody getting married compared to what used to be the case.
I don't know why. Well, that's the point of the discussion. Of course, there was a tax advantage once to get married.
And there still is in many comparable countries, but not here.
No, exactly. So we'd like to know what you think. Send us your views, post your comments by visiting
gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's the news with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It is fast approaching 2 minutes past 11. Well, the top story this morning, Sarah Sharif's mother, Olga, has spoken out in court, calling her daughter's killers sadistic and executioners. In an emotional impact statement, she's condemned them for the unimaginable suffering, she said, that the 10-year-old endured. Sarah's father, Irfan Sharif, and stepmother, Bainash Batul, were convicted of her murder, while her uncle, Faisal Malik, was found guilty of causing or allowing her death. Sarah's body was discovered last August in Woking, showing signs of extreme abuse, including over 25 broken bones, burns and bite marks. Prosecutors say the case shows a gross breach of trust, revealing Sarah's pain lasted for months before her tragic death. The automatic right to home educate children deemed at risk could soon be scrapped under new legislation being introduced in Parliament. The Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill follows that case of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif, whose family removed her from school before her murder. It would give local authorities new powers to ensure that children in unsafe environments do attend school and create a national register for children not in education. Charities warn the funding promised for family support services falls far short of what's needed. But Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told us earlier that too many children have been failed by the state, and these proposals are an important moment for child protection.
The measures that I'm setting out today are about how we protect children and keep them safe, that we've got much clearer visibility of where children are and where parents make a request to home educate their children, where they take them out of school, that if we have safeguarding concerns or a child protection investigation is underway, we'll make sure that local councils are able to deny that request that parents have if they're concerned about the well-being of children. There's a range of other measures in the bill that we're setting out today about how we all need to work together to share information, whether that's police, health, education, to really work to protect children and to keep them safe. It's a landmark piece of legislation.
Stop creating trouble. That is China's message to the UK today as tensions flare over spying accusations. Beijing has slammed what it called anti-China clamours from British MPs, accusing them of spreading lies and damaging relations. It comes after Yang Tengbo, alleged to be a Chinese spy with links to Prince Andrew, was banned from the UK. MPs here are now pushing for stricter controls on foreign influence, while the Labour government insists it is stepping up security. The row threatens to derail recent progress, including Sir Keir Starmer's landmark meeting with President Xi last month. For the first time in over a year, UK wage growth is on the rise, hitting 5.2% in the 3 months to October. But cracks in the jobs market are showing, with 31,000 fewer vacancies and payroll numbers dropping by 35,000 in November. Earnings are now growing faster than inflation by 3%, but concerns are mounting after the budget's hike in employer national insurance and next year's minimum wage rise. Unemployment stayed at 4.3%, though changes to the data could mean some uncertainty around the figures. Experts say the job market slowdown could deepen in the months ahead. And a top Russian general has been killed in a scooter bomb blast in Moscow, just a day after Ukraine accused him of war crimes. Igor Kirillov, in charge of Russia's nuclear, biological and chemical forces, died alongside his assistant when the bomb exploded outside an apartment building early this morning. Ukraine's security service has now confirmed it was responsible for the assassination in what it described as a special operation in Moscow. The remotely triggered device, packed with explosives, has left the entrance of the apartment in ruins with scorch marks, shattered windows and debris everywhere. Western nations had previously sanctioned him for deploying so-called barbaric weapons in Ukraine, and he was charged just yesterday with deploying banned chemical arms. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, we will, of course, keep across all of the latest details from court regarding Sarah Sharif's parents' sentencing later today. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Miriam.
Hello and welcome back. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and me, Miriam Cates.
So it's the big story of the week, isn't it? And it was a will he or wouldn't he? I always thought he wouldn't. The Duke of York, after all, will not be with the royal family for Christmas at Sandringham. A great tradition in the royal family.
Yes, and it is understood that he, Prince Andrew, and his ex-wife, the Duchess of York, have decided to avoid the annual family gathering after the Chinese spy scandal. But they didn't have much choice, did they?
I don't think they did.
All the media.
I don't think they did. Front pages. The BBC led on it last night. They thought that was the most important story of the day. Extraordinary.
You know, I totally understand that the story about the Chinese spy is one of national interest. That's true. But asking a hypothetical question whether Princess Andrew should then join his family at church on Christmas Day is not in the national interest.
Well, let's talk to the writer Hugo Vickers, who's quite an authority on the royal family. Hugo, morning to you, Hugo. Nice to see you again. You know Prince Andrew. You've met most of these senior members of the royal family. Did he fall on his sword voluntarily on this, do you think, or was he pushed firmly on it by somebody else?
Actually, I don't know Prince Andrew. I've met him a couple of times. But I would say that if you look at the sort of history of this thing, after the Newsnight interview, he was asked to step down, and he stepped down immediately and went quiet. And apart from issuing some denials from time to time, he's really been pretty quiet ever since. And my impression is that he voluntarily decided to step down. In some ways, I think it's a pity because they seem to have got the balance quite right. Nobody wants Prince Andrew in public life. That's completely accepted. He would not be a benefit anywhere. But privately, you know, he'd been included in Christmases. He obviously went to funerals of his parents. He did attend the coronation. That was probably one of the bigger things. But other than that, they seem to have got the balance right. But I was reading the various reports in the newspapers, and somebody came up with this idea that he should be banned from Christmas, banned from coming to Sandringham at all, banned from having a Christmas lunch, a ban from going to the royal family's annual get-together this week. And I think at that point, you know, he really probably did have no choice. He just decided that would be the story for the day. You know, one journalist even suggested people might be throwing vegetables at him. You know, best to stay away. But it's become quite unpleasant, don't you think?
Yeah, I know what you mean. There's also talk in Hugo that he ought to be the Labour peer George Fuchs. Never what said he'll jump on any bandwagon with George Fuchs, to be honest. I can say that because I've known him for a long time. But Lord Fuchs is saying he should be stripped of the Order of Merit. Can you explain to viewers and listeners what the Order of Merit is and why it is probably inconceivable that that will happen or should happen?
Well, can I just ask you, did he say the Order of Merit or did he say the Order of the Garter?
The Order of Garter, forgive me, the Order of the Garter, yeah.
OK, well, very few people have ever been stripped from the Order of the Garter. It's usually for high treason, and I don't think anyone's accusing Prince Andrew of high treason. The Duke of Windsor kept his Garter. Lord Beauchamp, who had to leave the country, he kept his Garter. The only recent times when Garters have been taken away was by people like the Kaiser and the Emperor of Austria. There were sort of, I think, 8 of them in the First World War, and the Emperor of Japan in the Second World War. And then Hirohito's Garter was restored to him. There's no reason for him to be removed from the Order of the Garter. He goes to the chapter, which takes place privately in the castle, and attends lunch. He does not take part in the procession.
And it's an award of chivalry.
It's an order of chivalry. It was given to him by the Queen. The Queen gave Prince Andrew and Prince Edward the Garter on, I think, on her 80th birthday. It's a gift with it entirely within the monarch's gift. It's very special. It's very much, regarded. I mean, recently the Duchess of Gloucester was given the Order of the Garter because she's been doing lots of good work. That was pretty unusual. Camilla was given the Garter by the Queen before. In the last months of the last reign, and Princess Alexandra has it, and various other members of the royal family. And it is considered very special. I mean, they're jolly excited when they get it, I can tell you that.
This story does really reveal something about how times have changed, doesn't it? Because in the past, in the distant past, of course, the royal family could do whatever they wanted. There was no question that they would lose their power or responsibility because of misbehaviour. I mean, they had a divine right to rule. But then in more recent past, there was still an understanding that royal family members could have a private life, and whether or not the public approved of it or not, they were still a member of the royal family. Are we in danger now of almost kind of politicising the royal family, that if they don't do things that we think are appropriate, suddenly they're cut off?
Well, I think we are, but I don't think it's only the royal family, do you? I mean, it's sort of the press, you're in the press, I'm sort of half in the press, I suppose, take such a sort of interest in people's lives, and they can sort of bring up all sorts of stories and things, and they can destroy people. I mean, you've seen numerous examples of that, and they force them to resign. I mean, Andrew will be the first to be have his radar out when the Prime Minister says that he's giving complete support to one minister. That usually means he'll be gone by the end of the week.
Yeah. Can I
if they can get rid of the Archbishop of Canterbury, and if they can get rid of Prince Andrew, well, what else can they get rid of? Who else will they be getting rid of? It's quite worrying.
Just briefly, Hugo, what is to be done with this troublesome prince? He can't be divorced. He can't be locked in the Tower. Should he give up Royal Lodge and go and live on a farm on the Balmoral estate, out of sight, out of mind? What would you recommend?
Well, I do know that the reason that he is unwilling to give up Royal Lodge is because it looks like a sort of confession of guilt, and he has not been proven guilty of any of these things. But having said that, what I would have suggested, or what I would think would have been a good idea in the reign of the Queen, or perhaps even now, would be that he should buy himself a house somewhere where he is completely safe, where he is not he can't be accused of taking any public money. I mean, that's actually been sorted out. So, I mean, actually going to Frogmore Cottage would work very well for him, because he would still be within the security boundary of Windsor Great Park. They would be protecting Windsor Home Park, rather, because of the other members of the royal family, because of Windsor Castle and the King and Queen and so forth. And so it would be no extra expense to look after him too, and he could go on riding in the park, which is what he likes doing. That's about all he does, that and a bit of golf. But he isn't going to return to public life. I don't really see what else he can do unless he decides to go and live abroad somewhere.
Hugo Vickers, thank you very much for joining us. I think that's
an interesting take
fair
too.
Point.
Interesting take.
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of people might be sympathetic.
Well, at least he won't have the fate of, I think it was Edward IV's rebellious brother, the Duke of Clarence, who was drowned in a vat of wine. That's how he chose to be killed.
Well, if you're going to be drowned...
Yes, well, exactly.
I hope it was a good wine.
Malmsey wine, what's that? That's what it was, anyway. My history...
Now, at GB News, we love to hear what you think. Every day we'll be running our poll of the day. Today we're asking, should hospices be exempt from the Chancellor's national insurance hike?
Well, we'll be bringing you the live results throughout the day, so make sure you stay tuned, and the final result will be announced later in Martin Daubney's show.
For all our latest poll news and how to vote, just go to gbnews.com/poll.
Well, sticking with that topic, Rachel Reeves plans to hike employers' national insurance. Which is believed to cost hospices an additional £5 million more each year.
So with more on this, our reporter Sophie Reaper is at a hospice in Didsbury. Sophie.
A very good morning to you both. Yes, this morning we're talking about national insurance and cuts to funding for hospices. So we thought, what better way to talk about that than to be in a hospice? We're here at Francis House, and joining us now are two of the residents here. So we'll speak to Vicky first. Vicky, very good morning to you. Talk to us about yourself and why you came to Francis House.
I was born with a congenital heart defect, and through finding out that I can go to hospice, then I started coming to the hospice since 2005 for respite, and now I'm living here for about 9 years.
So obviously we're talking about hospices being in danger. Now, it seems that Francis House is pretty secure, so for yourself that's great news, but other people around the country may not be in the best position. If Francis House were in danger, how would that make you feel?
Devastated. I would not know what to do because I would be panicking on where to go, how I'm gonna live without the support and the care that I do need, and I can't really live on my own without any carers or 24-hour care.
Vicky, thank you so much. We're going to go now from the second longest serving resident here at Francis House to the longest serving resident. Kyle, very good morning to you. Now, you've been receiving care from Francis House for over 25 years, that's right, isn't it?
Yep.
What would you do without Francis House?
Obviously, when I was going through a bad time at home, like growing up, it was just a safe zone. And I knew at least, like, for the weekend, I was going to be cared for well. So, obviously, like, families losing out on a Francis House, I should imagine, like, they'd be devastated.
And it's quite a scary prospect, isn't it, that some some hospices around the country could be facing closure. If Francis House were in that situation, how would you feel?
It'd just be devastating because it means so many things to so many families that just hundreds of people, like, wouldn't know where to turn.
And finally, if you had a message for people at home about the support and how vital it is to you, and to the government, who essentially need to give you more help, what would that message be?
Just, I can't say, like, how much it means, because it's just, like, so much to so many families, so many different things, so just need the funding, really.
Kyle, thank you so much, and thank you so much, Vicky, as well, for speaking so candidly. I know it's quite a difficult topic, isn't it? But there we are. This is the situation here at Francis House. It's a similar situation around the country, that these places take such care of those young people, those adults who really need hospice care. And if it continues the way it is, that many of them could be facing closure.
Sophie, thank you so much for that report there. That was Sophie Reaper at the Children's Hospice.
Do you think when she did the budget, when Rachel Reeves and raised the national insurance, that anybody had warned her, if you do this, Chancellor, this would not, it'll impact the charitable sector, including hospices who are caring for people who are dying?
Yeah, that's it, because it isn't just the hospices, as I said, it's all charities.
Well, I was at a charity dinner very recently for terminally ill children, and the chief executive, in his speech, he said, I don't want to be political, he said, but we face such a challenge because of the effect of the budget.
And the problem is, if they just increased national insurance by 1%, let's say, yes, it would have cost businesses more, but it wouldn't have had the impact that lowering the threshold from, I think, 12,000 to 5,000 before you have to start paying it. I mean, that's all part-time workers, low-paid workers. It's a huge extra chunk of cash that businesses just don't have the budget for, especially not charities.
But the lady, as we would say about somebody in the 80s, ain't for turning.
Well, it seems so. Well, find out about President-elect Donald Trump's legal action against a pollster after the break from Britain's Newsroom on GBNews.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
So, how did you get into radio initially?
It's the old thing. You do discos.
Yeah.
Back in the days when you used to put needles on.
What sort of year we're talking about?
Oh, It was black and white.
Okay.
That's as closest you're going to get.
Beatles, Rolling Stones.
Yeah. Sort of later than, sort of a bit later than that, doing discos. But then you sort of do a tape. I did a tape for BBC Radio Manchester, the local BBC station, and just one off. Got a copy of that. Edit. Yeah. Naively thought everybody's going to send a tape to Piccadilly, which was the Manchester station, which was 73. And instead of that, a couple of years later, I sent a tape to Radio City in Liverpool, not thinking that everybody in Liverpool's going to be sending a tape there. And just a guy just went, I'm too good for this, doing the overnights, walked out, and my tape was on the top of the pile. And I got a phone call on a Thursday night, Thursday, the 12th of February, 76. Can you do 2 till 6 in the morning on Radio City in Liverpool? I thought it was one of my pals.
And what was you talking about on that radio show?
It was an overnight programme, so it's music.
Yeah.
In those days, you didn't have much needle time, but clever devil here noticed that the BBC stuff was not needle time. Yeah. So I used to put like the Goons on and the Hancocks. So you've got half an hour and me and the security guy, Bert, on the door. We're the only two in the building. Yeah. I used to get in my car, put the Goons on, get in my car, dash down to the pier head, get a bacon butty, listening to it all the time, hoping that the record's not stuck, and then dashing back.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 22 minutes past 11. This is Britain's Newsroom, live across the United Kingdom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
A little earlier we spoke about the convicted terrorist suing a pub called the Saracen's Head, which he says is caused him deep offence.
By its sign, the landlord has set up a fundraiser and within the hour it is increased by over £1,000.
Fascinating, isn't it? Let's got our panel back, the former Labour MP Luciana Berger and the political commentator Piers Pottinger. During the election, you've run the gauntlet. Well, you had some terrible times because of anti-Semitism, Luciana, but Nigel Farage famously milkshake chucked in his face during campaigning in Clacton. The woman who did it, sentenced yesterday, did not get a judicial sentence. He's complained about two-tier sentencing. Should it have been a harsher sentence?
Well, I think it's really important that certainly I'm always mindful of the fact that our courts are independent.
Yeah.
That should certainly be the case, and they have sentencing guidelines, and it's up to to individual judges to consider the merits of each case and to determine what the sentencing is. And on this occasion, this individual has received 13 weeks in prison, but suspended for 12 months. So it wasn't, without some consequence. I think, there's a wider debate and discussion about any sort of violence that takes place in politics, which is completely unacceptable. But I'm very clear that, this is a matter for the courts in terms of determining what this case outcome was.
What struck me when I saw that she's not going to prison, how many people have been sent to prison for putting stuff on social media in the aftermath of the Southport riots. I'm not saying whether right or wrong, but some of them had never offended before, written in the heat of the moment. Some of them gone to prison for years.
Yeah. But I think, in each case, again, I think Luciana's right, because there used to be a crime called murmuring a judge, is if you started taking a judge's views or sentencing and started abusing the judge for that reason. But here, this woman who did this to Nigel was clearly a publicity seeker. Yeah. She was doing it to get the coverage. She's a sort of glamour model, whatever that means these days. And she was doing it to get publicity, which she clearly has succeeded in doing. And also with the prisons as full as they are we actually doing anyone a great favour by putting her in prison? I don't think it's No, I mean, she's got a criminal record. She's got a suspended sentence.
Yeah.
If she does anything again, then she could really be in trouble. And hopefully it does serve a warning, because anyone who attacks anyone involved in politics, particularly during an election campaign, they're interfering with democracy. And they should face the full force of the law. And in this case, I think, on balance, I'm afraid I wouldn't call it two-tier justice. I would call it this is about right.
Right. I mean, my point would be it must be more and more nerve-wracking for politicians in this day and age, because of social media, has increased the hostility to politicians. We saw it out to David Amess, the Labour MP who died in the referendum, Joe Cox, killed by some lunatic right-winger. And so I wondered if the sentence might be tougher as a deterrent, to act as a deterrent.
I mean, again, it is a matter for the courts to look at all, that they have at their disposal all the background, everything else that we don't have when we discuss this here, on live television. I mean, again, I think there's a separate discussion about, you said about the challenges of what happens online. I think what happens online can be as serious, if not more serious, than what can happen in person, only because it can inspire others to conduct acts physically in person, and also it reaches more people by the very act of being able to amplify on various social media channels. So I'm very clear that we should be looking at both of them equally, and not, that whether it happens on the online space or in person, they're both as serious as each other.
Yeah,
interesting. Well, shall we move on to a different story? There's one in the Telegraph about private doctors being accused of cashing in on demand for ADHD diagnosis. This is something we've been reporting on over recent weeks. Huge rise in the number of people signed off sick with ADHD. Could it actually be in response to doctors giving out diagnoses too easily? What do you think, Luciana?
I think the thing we need to focus on first and foremost, and this is a fringe issue, the main issue is that there are thousands of people in this country that are waiting up to 3 years for an NHS evaluation and assessment, and that needs to be addressed. And I welcome the fact that the government said that we're going to see 40,000 more appointments kind of come forward, because that's desperately needed. I don't accept. I mean, first of all, anyone accessing private services should be aware of looking at both what the NICE guidelines are, which are very, very clear in this regard. Also, looking at whether those services have been evaluated by the CQC, the Care Quality Commission, to determine whether they're actually legitimate. And I think, we should be doing everything possible to root out any services that are kind of preying on people's concerns. But what we shouldn't be doing when discussing this is actually acknowledge, to the detriment or not acknowledge the fact that there's a very serious challenge both for children and for adults in this country, where the vast majority are waiting exorbitant lengths of time.
Indeed, but there's also been a lot of discussion about the huge rise in the number of people claiming disability benefit, and a huge number of those people are accounted for by the rise in claiming ADHD as a disability.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question of the really ill people and the malingerers. And unfortunately, COVID, I think, hasn't helped the situation, because people got used to staying at home and feeling ill and being told if they felt ill not to do anything and stay at home. And so I'm sure there's an element of that has affected this situation. When it comes to the wonderful 40,000 new appointments, I think, unfortunately, the waiting period for those 40,000 new appointments, I think, is something like 3 years, because Wes Streeting hasn't actually said when he's going to achieve this, because, of course, he's not, by the hopeless situation with the NHS. Like everything else, whether it's defence or the NHS, the government is having strategic reviews. In the NHS case, it's a consultation online with the general public, which is going to achieve diddly squat, I think, is the phrase.
What will make a difference is the fact that the government has announced in the recent budget a significant sum to essentially deal with these large waiting lists, be that for physical health conditions or...
But you don't buy waiting lists. I'm sorry,
you
buy off.
You invest by making sure that there's appointments both at the weekend and after hours to bring those waiting lists down. So you're making
people work longer hours, is what we're talking about.
For overtime, yes.
Yes, which is, of course, very expensive and is not actually a solution to the core problem. I mean, this is, again, what successive governments have done, tinkering with the NHS and throwing money at it without actually biting the bullet and understanding it needs complete restructuring. Because we all know it's broken, even Wes Streeting knows, but what is happening now is it's just not going to achieve anything.
I don't accept that. I do think that what the government set out to do is a two-pronged approach, both to deal with what are ridiculously high waiting lists, both for physical health conditions, the waiting list around 7 million people in this country waiting for an elective operation, and around 2 million people in this country waiting either for an ADHD assessment or for a mental health appointment. And again, we need to be addressing both of those. They've announced in the budget this additional money for the NHS, over £20 billion. That's not insignificant. And what we have heard, I think, which is particularly relevant from the Health Secretary, is how, as a country, we're going to be moving from currently where we have disproportionate amount of crisis care, people being treated in hospitals, transferring that to the community, and also having this shift towards prevention. So much of what the NHS contends with today is preventable conditions, and that's what we need to be addressing.
Very briefly, you're very excited by this. The new face of Match of the Day has been announced. She's called Kelly Cates, female. She's the daughter of a very famous footballer called Kenny Dalglish. You're very excited by this. You don't think it's right,
Well,
do you?
I don't know anything about her or whether she's a good football commentator, so leaving that to one side. But it does seem to be an instance where most people that watch football are men.
Right.
Most people that play football. I mean, women's game is growing and everything, but why shouldn't it be a man?
Yeah, well, I absolutely
why does it have to be a man?
But I predicted it would be a woman.
Yeah,
I predict the next Archbishop of Canterbury will be a woman.
It doesn't actually matter, because when there were no presenters on Match of the Day,
right.
they had higher ratings.
There you go.
So it doesn't matter who. They could have Sooty and Sweep doing it. Actually, that would be more entertaining.
Maybe you and I could do it, Piers, because I don't know anything about football.
I expect her not in and around football her life, and therefore, you'd expect that she has some great qualifications. I don't know her personally either, but I'm delighted that she's been appointed.
They're going to rotate. It's her, a bloke whose name I can't remember, and Gabby Yorth.
OK.
So
Nevertheless, the number of male role models for young boys, particularly working-class boys in this country, to look up to is going down and down and down, and that is a problem.
Don't think they looked up to Gary Lineker, do you?
I would suggest that they wouldn't find their role model necessarily in the person that...
It's about, I think, young boys, particularly poor boys, no longer have any images of what does it mean to be a man, what does it mean to be a good man, what does it mean to be a successful man. There's just fewer and fewer available for them.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And that is an issue we should be addressing.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily within the domains of that role.
We've got to rush to the headlines a little late with Sam Francis, who is a role model to many of us.
Very good morning to you. It is 32 minutes past 11. The top story this morning, Sarah Sharif's mother, Olga, has spoken out in court, calling her daughter's killers sadists and executioners. In an emotional impact statement, she condemned them for the unimaginable suffering that the 10-year-old endured. Sarah's father, Irfan Sharif, and stepmother, Bainash Batul, were convicted of her murder, while her uncle, Faisal Malik, was found guilty of causing or allowing her death. Sarah's body was discovered last August in Woking, showing signs of extreme abuse, including over 25 broken bones, burns and bite marks. Prosecutors say the case shows a gross breach of trust, revealing Sarah's pain lasted for months before her death. Well, the automatic right to home educate children deemed at risk could be scrapped under new legislation being introduced in Parliament. The Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill follows the case of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif, whose family removed her from school before her murder. It would give local authorities new powers to ensure that children in unsafe environments attend school and create a national register for children not in education. Charities are warning the funding promised for family support services falls far short of what's needed. But Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson told us earlier that too many children have already been failed by the state and says these proposals are an important moment for child protection.
The measures that I'm setting out today are about how we protect children and keep them safe, that we've got much clearer visibility of where children are and where parents make a request to home educate their children, where they take them out of school, that if we have safeguarding concerns or a child protection investigation is underway, we'll make sure that local councils are able to deny that request that parents have if they're concerned about the well-being of children. There's a range of other measures in the bill that we're setting out today about how we all need to work together to share information, whether that's police, health, education, to really work to protect children and to keep them safe. It's a landmark piece of legislation.
Stop creating trouble. That is China's message to the UK today as tensions flare over spying accusations. Beijing has slammed what it called anti-China clamours from British MPs, accusing them of spreading lies and damaging relations. It comes after Yang Tengbo, alleged to be a Chinese spy with links to Prince Andrew, was banned from the UK. MPs are now pushing for stricter controls on foreign influence, while the government insists it is stepping up security. The row threatens to derail recent progress, including Sir Keir Starmer's landmark meeting with President Xi Jinping last month. Council tax is set to rise by nearly £330 million next year. The government says that is to fund policing across England and Wales. A provisional 3.5% increase in funding for police forces is on the table, but 1/3 of that boost depends on council taxes rising by £14 for the average Band D home. Policing Minister Dame Deanna Johnson says the funding strikes a balance between protecting taxpayers and providing vital resources for police forces. The additional cash will cover officer pay rises, increase national insurance costs and recruitment to meet the Labour government's neighbourhood policing promises. And the UK has hit Russia with new sanctions today on 2 major Russian-linked firms and 20 ships involved in transporting illicit Russian oil. The government is also providing £35 million in emergency funding for Ukraine, which faces ongoing missile attacks targeting vital Ukrainian infrastructure. It comes as nearly 15 million Ukrainians now urgently need humanitarian aid as the winter sets in. Joining the UK, Denmark, Sweden, Poland, Finland and Estonia have all pledged to crack down on shadow vessels in the Baltic. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you just after midday. Now, though, a quick break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, coming up at noon, we've got Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily, and they're joining us now in the studio. So what's coming up today?
Well, my goodness me, have you seen that Brussels is now suing Britain?
Yes, we have, Tom.
I mean, it's extraordinary.
We're rolling our eyebrows.
Over the terms of the withdrawal agreement and how EU citizens are treated in the UK, but it's all mood music. It's all background about this renegotiation that the government is now embarking upon. They've hired 100 civil servants to rewrite our Brexit deal. And on the table, apparently, access to fish, EU rules over our agriculture, and even aspects of freedom of movement. I mean, this is serious stuff.
Yeah, I guess we need... the question is, how is Keir Starmer going to react to all this? Will he put our interest first?
No.
Will he give away some of our sovereignty? Is that where we're going? We're going to be hearing from staunch Brexiteers on our show to see what exactly they're going to do, because there are rumours that a lot of those Brexiteers have all but given up. They don't see the point of fighting anymore. They don't see the point of fighting
Wasn't
anymore.
this a scheduled
Keir
review
Starmer's going to
anyway?
give away our sovereignty, and that's that.
There was always going to be this time, 2025, was the term to review the withdrawal agreement. That was written into the terms of it. What I think the people that wrote it did not expect is that there would be a change of government. Because if you remember when that deal was signed, the Conservatives had a huge majority. The Labour Party was back to the smallest number of seats it had since 1935. It was unlikely, whatever the outcome of the next election, it was unlikely that it would be a massive Labour majority. But of course,
there's an irony. This is happening. This attempt to get us much closer into bed with Brussels when the German Chancellor, Starmer's great mate, just lost a vote of confidence. Election in February. The French government is in complete chaos. The two biggest players in the European Union in total chaos. Why do we want to be saddled with that lot?
Well, Keir Starmer kicked off by making friends with all the wrong people.
Certainly
people
did.
on their way out in Europe anyway. We've also been having a dig through this Migration Advisory Committee report into Labour's policy on immigration. They've essentially come to the conclusion that Labour's flagship policy of essentially upskilling the domestic population in order to remove the need for migration won't work. Or at least there's absolutely no guarantee that it will. So there you go.
It's remarkable, isn't it? Not exactly rocket science that, you know, when politicians say the way we control migration, it's by upskilling domestic... No, it's not. It's by having border controls. you think that that's elementary.
I know. Well, we're with you. We've got to...
Elementary, my dear boy.
Well, all that's coming up at midday.
Exactly,
and still to come, we're going to get to the bottom of why there's been a collapse in marriage rates in young couples. Are they lacking love, or does there need to be more financial incentive? Find out next.
For Tom, maybe.
Hello, I'm here with your Met Office weather forecast for GB News. Now, the winds are going to be a big talking point for today. They're really going to strengthen as we go through the rest of today. It's all due to an area of low pressure that is coming in, and it's actually deepening as it tracks just to the north of the UK, which is why we're going to see our winds really picking up. The strongest winds will be around western coastal parts. Could see gales, perhaps gusts of around 60 miles per hour in the most exposed spots, but everywhere it is going to turn increasingly blustery. Across northern and western areas, we will have outbreaks of rain mixed in with the windy weather, staying drier towards the east. But for all of us, temperatures still a little bit above average for the time of year. So yes, it will be windy, but it is also going to be pretty mild. Now, as we head through this evening, this is when we're likely to see the heaviest rain. And so across parts of Scotland, some heavy outbreaks of rain affecting western parts where we have already seen quite a bit of rain earlier on this week. A little bit drier further east. Plenty of wet weather across parts of Northern Ireland, much of northern western England and Wales. Meanwhile, across the far east southeast of England, it will be turning increasingly cloudy later, but the rain not really arriving until later this evening and overnight. But the rain does spread through, become widespread across the whole of the country. There will be some drier bursts in between the outbreaks of rain, but for many it is going to be quite wet at times and also pretty windy overnight as well. All the time, the strongest winds towards the north and west. Because of the cloud, because of the wind, temperatures not dropping a huge amount. These overnight mins closer to what you'd expect for our daytime highs at this time of year. As we go through tomorrow, a blustery, cloudy, and for some of us, wet start, but a lot of that clears away towards the east for a time, and then we see something a bit drier and brighter with some sunshine breaking out for a time before some more wet weather comes in from the southwest, spreading across central and southern parts. Temperatures tomorrow look even higher than today. See you later.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11:43 and welcome back to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, it's Advent. Advent starts, of course, on December the 1st, so as we count down to Christmas Day, we're hearing from church ministers, vicars across the country. Each day they've got a special message for you to celebrate the festive season.
The GB News Advent Calendar, Day 17.
Hello, I'm Reverend Mike Milmine and welcome to St Leonard's Church in Denton, where I'm priest in charge. Many of our favourite stories begin like this. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away. But the Christmas story begins very differently. St Luke's account starts like this. In the reign of Caesar Augustus, while Quirinius was governor of Syria, real people, real dates, the Christmas story is anchored in human history. It's tempting to cast the Christmas story as a lesson-filled fable full of moral nuggets that we can extract in the way that we do with a fairy tale. But the Christmas story won't allow itself to be read in that way. The truth and endurance of the Christmas story lies in the fact that the events really did happen. The mere fact that it's 2024 is testimony to that, the decisive moment in which God breaks into human history and nothing will ever be the same again.
Oh, I like those messages.
They are. They're fantastic. And you can see all of them together in one place. Watch them again, special Advent messages, by visiting gbnews.com/Advent.
Up next, why are marriage rates falling? But first, if you're in search of some winter sun, well, there's none here, let me tell you. Well, in the studio there is, obviously. I mean, outside the door. Here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Unsettled at times across western parts of Europe with some stronger winds and perhaps some outbreaks of rain, but elsewhere it should be largely settled. Fairly breezy around Madeira, though largely dry, just a bit cloudy. Perhaps some thicker cloud moving into parts of Portugal with a risk of some rain, and also fairly breezy around coasts. But elsewhere it's going to be largely settled, lots of dry weather around, though perhaps just a few showers around northern parts of Italy. And the remaining largely settled as we head into the weekend, just a slight dip in temperatures by Saturday.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Well, you've been getting in touch with your views and opinions. We've got a few emails here. Mark says, I'm more bothered about the Chinese spy meeting with past and present prime ministers than with Prince Andrew.
Well, the ones we know of are Theresa May and David Cameron, because the idiot spy, alleged, put the photographs on his desk because he's obviously very proud. Both those prime ministers, former prime ministers, of course, say they have no recollection of meeting him. Which I'm sure that's right.
Yeah, and obviously he passed any kind of security or vetting tests that surrounded them at the time.
Well, I do think the security service have a lot to answer for. How did this man get so close to a senior member of the royal family, former prime ministers? Who else?
But this country has got a close relationship with China. We've got lots and lots of Chinese people in this country, lots of Chinese students, lots of Chinese businesses.
Cameron took the president of China for a pint. I don't think he drank the pint, actually, but took him for a drink to the pub in Chequers when he was PM. Do you remember?
Yes, I do. That wasn't when he left his child behind, was it? It was the same visit. And Jack says, love Miriam, love Andrew. Thank you very much.
Oh, Jack.
Christmas
Your
kindness.
family are very loyal, Miriam.
Yes, that's right. Well, still to come, why
I didn't know Miriam's husband was called Jack.
It's a false name. Why are marriage rates collapsing? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Our next guest has a rather unique career story. She was working at a pub aged 18 and Holly Farmer was spotted by a modelling scout and it turned out to be her lucky day.
Scott Yoz Clark sent this message to Holly.
Holly, 18, 5'10", she does not belong in a pub. And I absolutely love that, Holly, because it's a bit like Dirty Dancing, where it's like, you can't put baby in the corner. Holly does not belong in a pub. You belong on the catwalk. What was that moment like for you when you were scouted by Yoz?
It was crazy. I have to say I wasn't expecting it, to be honest. Like, I was just on my lunch break. I was working at a pub, so... I was on my lunch break walking, going to Primark and...
You're going to Primark?
Got stopped by yours.
And how did that interaction go?
Well, first question was, how tall are you? So, 5'10".
Very much that.
Yeah, then he gave me his card and explained everything, that he's a model scout, obviously.
Yeah, because generally when I scout, especially when I get close to that person, I tend to look in their eyes, and when you see something there, it's like everything works on the face and then the eyes gives you away.
Well, you've spotted a gem in Holly. I mean, you can tell even when you walked in, you are built to be a model.
I did my first fashion week here in London and then went to Paris and it was really fun.
Wow.
Now it's my full-time job. It's a bit crazy, to be honest, to be able to say that modelling is my full-time job now. Some brands will ask you to be a bit more serious and then others not
so it depends on the client's request as well. Ellie, give us your best model face, ready? 3, I wonder if we can come back. 3, 2, 1. Very nice.
High fashion.
Yeah.
But you guys do all contorted moves, don't you?
Yeah.
Like all this high fashion. Do yours?
I'm just permanently living in model
You actually
model
are,
world.
though. He actually
this
does.
is it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So welcome back. We're getting the emails and texts coming in. Lots of people, so many people are excited by this pub, and so you should be, because for God's sake, this man's running a nice pub. It's been going strong for a very long time. It's in Steve Baker's old constituency, which is Wycombe, High Wycombe.
Yeah.
And Steve went there to the pub to show support, bought a pint, because a convicted terrorist is taking him to court because he says the sign, the Saracen's Head, is causing him offence. I'm sorry if it causes you offence, Mr Terrorist. Your terrorist activities cause us much more offence.
But it is part... We were talking about this yesterday, weren't we, with our panel, and it's part of this trend to rename things about the past that we now think were morally reprehensible. And some of them were morally reprehensible, but I'm sure will be seen as morally reprehensible by generations to come.
History happened.
Yeah.
That's what it's called.
And you don't know who you are unless you know your history. And if we cover over the things about our history that we don't like, how will you ever stop those mistakes and things?
Soon, you see lots of pubs with the crown and it says the Queen's Head. Soon people are going to be saying, I'm gay, I object to that because that's gay slang. I mean, you can see where this could go.
You can. Well, last week we had on somebody from an animal charity who objected to the name the Sly Fox. Said it was offensive to foxes. There's no end to this. We're going to become a very bland society.
You must have come across so many foxes mewling about their horror at this pub sign. So stupid.
So we've got some more comments about Prince Andrew. Malcolm says, this is ridiculous. Andrew was in the Navy. He flew air support in the Falklands during the war, getting ridiculed just because of someone he knew. Who cares about the Chinese alleged spy? He wasn't the only one duped.
I wonder if there's more sympathy for Andrew out there than people think,
It does seem. I thought it was only me, and that one.
Yeah, because he's pulled out of Christmas. It's been ever since he's been a royal. He's been standing at Christmas with the Queen, the royal family. The walk to church is a very traditional part of the... Those images have been beamed worldwide. Yeah. But, of course, the royal family, conscious of their image, have told him to stay away.
And I think people can see that although some of the previous allegations were either his fault or very unwise, how was he supposed to know
who this bloke was?
Exactly, when even former Prime Ministers didn't.
And he has made clear that he was introduced to the Chinese businessman, stroke maybe a spy, through official diplomatic circles.
So why would he smell a rat?
Yeah,
for want of a better phrase.
He is the master of his own misfortune. He did write a cheque, probably with the help of the late Queen, for £12 million to Virginia Giuffre, who claims there was sexual contact between her and him. He says he never met her. Do you normally write a cheque for £12 million someone you never met?
No, that is a bit odd.
But he didn't want to go into court?
No, well, no, absolutely.
And the royal family didn't want him to go into court?
The whole question of the royal family really does challenge our modern kind of idea of meritocracy and choosing your own identity. You absolutely don't choose your identity if you're born into a royal family.
Yeah,
that is your job for life, whether you like it or not, and whether or not you're good at it or not, frankly, as well.
Exactly. Well, that's it from us. Tom and Emily are joining us shortly for this. What are they presenting?
Good afternoon, Britain.
Yeah, of course they are. That's it from us. Beverly Turner's back tomorrow. She's popping in for a flying visit, and Miriam will be back with us again on Thursday. So up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily, and that's it from us. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Well, a new report has dropped by the government's own advisers on their migration policy, and it's not positive reading for the government's flagship policy, that's for sure. They say this report says that actually their flagship policy won't work at all in cutting those sky-high levels of migration. We'll dig into the detail.
And the UK is being sued by Brussels. All this as renegotiations are taking place on the Brexit deal. What on earth is going on? All of that to come after your weather forecast.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Gradually turning more unsettled from the west with strengthening winds and also some outbreaks of rain moving in, but it is going to be largely mild for the time of year. Fairly settled across the south and southeast, though plenty of cloud and perhaps some quite murky conditions across the southeast to start with some fog around hilly areas, and gradually turning more unsettled from the west as we see outbreaks of rain across parts of Scotland and then later on moving into parts of Northern Ireland and western parts of England and Wales. This could be quite heavy and persistent at times, particularly in the afternoon across northern parts of Scotland, and it is going to turn more and more blustery from the west throughout the day too, but those temperatures generally holding up between the low double digits. As we finish off the day, those outbreaks of rain set to continue, turning heavy at times around western and northern parts of Scotland, and still those blustery winds, particularly around coastal areas. Outbreaks of rain continuing too across Northern Ireland, western parts of northern England too, and turning very blustery through into the Irish Sea Channel as well. And once again, those outbreaks of rain for western parts of Wales and southwest England, where once again this could turn heavy for a time. Across the far southeast, it will stay dry, but then gradually